bumpy road. The U.S. pushes for more democracy in Myanmar despite major obstacles. No surprises, the new Republican majority on Capitol Hill chooses its leaders for the new term. Back to the fold, a group aims to get Latinos fired up and involved in the Catholic Church. And UN papal visit? Is a trip to the United Nations in New York City in the works for Pope Francis? Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, November 13th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. New tonight, the White House is expected to announce a plan next week that could potentially shield as many as 5 million illegal immigrants from deportation. Details are still developing, but it is somewhat expected. President Obama had said that he is willing to use executive action, defying the wishes of some in Congress, especially the new GOP majority. And no big surprise here either. There will be familiar faces in new positions for the Senate's next session. Jason Calvi reports from Capitol Hill.
Brian, Senate Republicans elected Mitch McConnell of Kentucky to be the next Senate Majority Leader. He'll take over here when Congress begins again in January. As the Majority Leader, McConnell will set the agenda for the Senate. Last week, Kentucky voters elected him to a 6th term. In the midterm elections, Republicans gained a Senate majority for the first time in 8 years. And on the Democratic side of the Senate, the current Majority Leader, Harry Reid, won re-election as leader of the Senate Democrats. His party senators met for several hours today, laying out their plans after losing power in last week's election. Senator Reid blamed it on lower voter turnout, while McConnell had tough words for the president.
We have to create an atmosphere where the middle class feels that we're fighting for them.
I've been very disturbed about the way the president has proceeded in the wake of the election, whether it was his intervention on net neutrality, his apparent decision to move ahead on immigration.
And over at the House today, Republicans have again picked John Boehner to be the Speaker of the House. It'll be his 3rd term in that role. The House Democrats will be voting next week. It's likely that Nancy Pelosi will again take over the position of leading the Democrats in the House. Brian?
All right, Jason Calvi reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. President Obama's week-long tour of Asia continues. He's in Myanmar, pushing for more democracy there. Chief White House correspondent Suzanne LaFranchi is following the president's trip.
Mr. Obama's talk with Myanmar's president began with a photo op in the opulent palace.
The democratization process in Myanmar is real.
The president has been pressuring Thein Sein to uphold human rights of the persecuted Muslim minority, hold inclusive elections, and continue moving towards a democratic society. Obama has made democratization in Myanmar, also known as Burma, a central part of his policy in Asia. He visited the nation just 2 years ago. The president seized upon the country's surprise shift away from decades-long military rule by ending sanctions against the nation. Mr. Obama is now seeking to reverse a backslide in the country's efforts toward a freer and fairer society and says there is progress.
We've seen political prisoners that have been released. We have seen an effort to end the practice of children being recruited into the army. There is a genuine prospect for a ceasefire.
Myanmar's pro-democracy opposition figure Aung San Suu Kyi is banned from next year's elections. White House aides say the situation is fluid and concede more can be done to promote greater democracy. Tomorrow, the president will fly to Yangon, Myanmar's largest city. There, he will meet with Suu Kyi. The two are scheduled to hold a joint news conference. From the White House, Suzanne LaFranchi, EWTN News Nightly.
Shibani Mahtani covers Southeast Asia for the Wall Street Journal, joining us by Skype from Myanmar. Can you tell us what the situation there is in Myanmar as the president visits? I know that there has been a lot of concern about democracy, the direction of democracy, as well as persecution of the Muslim minority there.
Yes, so I think President Obama is coming at a time where there are fears that reforms here have stalled and that Myanmar has done maybe some of the easier things on their democratic path, but are not willing to move as far as the international community wants them to, especially on the Muslim minority in Rakhine State, the Rohingya.
Is there anything the president can do by his mere presence there and the U.S. can do to improve that situation with the Muslim minority there, the Rohingya?
Yeah, I think the U.S. has made it very, very clear that, the world is watching the way Myanmar does treat this minority population. Conditions there for them have deteriorated over the past year. And now the government's even kind of floating a plan that will remove even more of the citizenship rights for those that they consider, that don't fit into their verification process. It's quite a complicated one. The U.S. has indicated that it's an internal issue for Myanmar, but it's very much pushing on the human rights aspect. And if they pressure the government slightly more on this, I think it will give President Thein Sein, the Myanmar president, and his government a bit more of an impetus to actually try to bring their standards of living up to what the rest of the world wants.
And finally, President Obama met with the president of Myanmar, but will also meet with the democracy opposition leader. How significant is that?
So what's been very interesting is the dynamics of his visit have been very much focused on opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi, which was quite different from when Secretary of State John Kerry visited back in August, where he spent more time with the government. I think this is President Obama trying to, show a message that he still very much cares about the opposition movement, the leader herself, which has obviously embodied the struggle against the military and against, very hardline rule in Myanmar for the past 60 years. And I think that's an indication that the U.S. is still, very much pushing forward the democratic process and supporting the opposition in their journey.
And very briefly, does she have much influence, and perhaps what opportunities might she be missing, this opposition leader?
So the biggest problem for her right now is that the constitution, Myanmar's constitution, prevents her from assuming the presidency, even if the party wins a majority of seats in parliament. And that's because, she was married to a British national and has 2 foreign sons. That clause was very much written with her in mind and to stop her from becoming the leader of the country. And I think President Obama is coming also with the message that elections next year should be free and fair, but has really stopped short of telling the Myanmar government, you need to change this or that, which some people are not very happy about.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic, and we appreciate the insight. Shibani Mahtani, covering Southeast Asia for the Wall Street Journal, joining us by Skype from Myanmar. Thank you so much. And here in the States, will the officer who shot Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, face criminal charges? As a grand jury deliberates, attorneys for Brown's family say they're begging protesters to remain calm.
We realize that some people are anxious, angry, and want instant answers. However, violence, looting, and rioting is not a responsible way of expressing those feelings.
The attorneys also take law enforcement to task for not exercising more restraint last summer. Ferguson police were criticized for using tear gas and armored vehicles in response to mostly peaceful protests. Well, 2 window washers who were dangling hundreds of feet above New York are doing well tonight, thank God. Yesterday, they were stuck 68 stories up at the new World Trade Center tower. When a cable snapped, the 2 workers were left dangling for 2 hours. One of them called his wife, fearing it might be the last time they could speak to each other. Firefighters eventually rescued the pair, cutting through a sealed window. The window was being replaced today. Window cleaning has been suspended as the investigation continues. There are fears in Ukraine that Russia is preparing to attack the eastern part of that country. Fighting between Ukrainian government forces and pro-Russian rebels continues tonight. Most of it revolves around strategic areas, such as the airport near Donetsk. Ukraine and NATO say they have seen military equipment flowing into the rebel-controlled areas from Russia this past week. Russia's foreign minister denies troops are massing or that supplies are being moved into rebel areas. The Vatican's ambassador to the United Nations is strongly hinting at a visit by Pope Francis to the UN in New York. Archbishop Bernardito Auza says only the Pope himself will make it official. Next year marks the 70th anniversary of the United Nations. Archbishop Auza says that would be the ideal time for a papal visit. Coming up, an ethicist discusses the chilling case of more than a dozen deaths resulting from India's sterilization campaign. Today, we honor St. Frances Xavier Cabrini. Mother Cabrini is the first U.S. citizen to be elevated to sainthood. She is the patron of immigrants, and her feast day coincides with the 60th anniversary of the closing of New York's Ellis Island, of course, the gateway for many immigrants from Europe into the U.S. Thanks for joining us on this 13th of November, a Thursday evening. A doctor in India is arrested in the deaths of 13 women after a government-run sterilization drive. He claims he did nothing wrong, but the number of victims continues to rise. Catherine Zeltner reports.
The procedure was free, and the government even offered $23 as an incentive. Doctors performed 83 sterilizations in just 6 hours. 13 women have died, more than 60 are hospitalized, and the families are grieving. My wife had severe pain and started vomiting the day after the surgery. I took her to the hospital. She died half an hour later, says the husband of one victim. It's very difficult for me. I have 3 very young children. Health workers travel from village to village, encouraging women who have 2 or 3 children to get this procedure. I was given a urine test, blood pressure test, and then the surgery. After that, I took painkillers and antibiotics, one victim says. I'm not sure who to blame, the doctor or the medicines. India is the second most populous country in the world, with a population of 1.25 billion. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
We're using Skype tonight to connect with Dr. Pia de Solenni in San Diego, an ethicist and cultural analyst. You've been following and writing about this story, and I wonder, is this type of sterilization campaign common in India and maybe other countries as well?
Well, yeah, they're very common. The article that I looked at was from CNN. The reporting said that, these campaigns are normal. Women are frequently paid for it. What normally doesn't happen, or at least that we don't hear about, is that women die from it and women end up in hospitals with serious complications.
So aside from the tragedy of these deaths and the serious complications, what other ethical issues are we dealing with here?
I mean, they're huge, they're myriad. I think that, first of all, we're really struggling with how it is that we value women. We're saying that women in many essences in many ways are expendable. And in many of these cultures, they already are thought expendable. And now we're reinforcing that. I think particularly if women are coerced to have sterilization procedures, or if they feel pressured, let's say it's not strictly speaking coercion, but it's pressured because of economic situations, again, we have serious ethical problems. Women should not be put in a situation where they feel that they have to undergo a procedure like this in order to not have children because they can't afford them or because they won't be welcome in a community. And in many cases, too, it's the gender of the child that will be born that raises an issue again.
Let's look at another part of the world. In Kenya, the Catholic bishops are condemning another possible sterilization program. I want to show you a quote from what they said. It said, "We shall not waver in calling upon all Kenyans to avoid the tetanus vaccination campaign laced with beta HCG because we are convinced that it is indeed a disguised population control program." What do you know about that situation?
So the bishops conducted some independent studies which confirmed that these 4 vials of the tetanus vaccine were in fact laced with HCG. The issue here is why? Why do you have a tetanus shot that's laced with a pregnancy hormone? Also, the regimen has been changed. Normally, the tetanus shot is given every 10 years, as most of us here in the United States are well aware. Here, it's being targeted to women of ages 1840 to 49, so women of childbearing age, and it's being given every 6 months. So while the hormone is typically a pregnancy hormone, when it's given in small doses repeatedly, the body begins to create antibodies against it. And what happens is that in these women, it could potentially cause infertility. What we're thinking, the thinking is that it's temporary infertility, not long-term infertility, miscarriage, and stillbirths. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of reporting because many of the births in this country happen in their home births, and there isn't a reporting mechanism, not an extensive and complete one.
Well, it's all very disturbing, and I know you're writing a lot about this at your website, moraltheologian.com. Dr. Pia de Solenni, thanks for joining us on EWTN News Nightly.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
And in Mexico, protesters take a police officer hostage in response to the unsolved disappearance of nearly 4 dozen college students. He's not just any officer. Juan Jose Gatica is the Undersecretary of Public Safety in the violent state where the students are missing. His capture reflects the rising anger and power of the protesters. The southern region is also dealing with drug trade and gang-related violence. Scientists are examining their first close-up images sent back from a spacecraft that landed on a speeding comet yesterday. Look at these pictures from the Philae probe. It's now sitting on the comet about 310 million miles from Earth. The European Space Agency says it was a soft landing as planned. However, a harpoon and screw system to keep the probe connected to the comet didn't work right, so it kind of bounced a little. After reviewing these images, scientists will send further instructions to the lander as its mission continues. Up next, as some Latinos turn away from Catholicism, a group hopes to turn the tide by getting Hispanics fired up for the faith. And the Sistine Chapel Choir treats us to a heavenly chorus. The patrons of the arts of the Vatican museums commemorate St. Augustine of Hippo's birthday on Facebook today. Several beautiful paintings depicting this doctor of the church. This is EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, November 13th. Good evening, I'm Brian Patrick. Pope Francis is making good on his commitment to the poor, a key theme of his pontificate. He's having showers built for the homeless near St. Peter's Basilica. Vatican Insider reporter Andrea Tornielli says 3 showers will be installed in the public restrooms for pilgrims in St. Peter's colonnades. The Pope reportedly approved that step after hearing from the Vatican's chaplain who is devoted to the poor of Rome. Well, a forum of Catholic-Muslim dialogue has just wrapped up at the Vatican. The conference was sponsored by the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. Joining us from Rome tonight, Professor Ingrid Mattson, Chair of Islamic Studies at the University of Western Ontario in Canada. Professor Mattson, as a member of the Islamic delegation, I wonder if you can give us some very brief highlights of the joint declaration that came out of this forum.
To me, the highlight was our commitment to joint action, that even in these very difficult times, we continue to be committed to dialogue, to engagement, and to making space in this world for positive religious action.
What about the common commitment against terrorism? I know that is a concern for much of the world right now.
Oh, it's a concern absolutely for all of us. We had at our meeting this week a Christian Catholic sister from Iraq who brought heart-wrenching stories of the religious minorities in Iraq, Christians and others who are facing a terrible situation from religious extremists. And at the same time, we had a Muslim brother from Libya who was bringing us the same stories there. You know, 100% Muslim country where these religious extremists are killing others in the name of their religion. So we are absolutely aware of the seriousness of this issue, very concerned about it, and deeply committed to doing everything that's in our power to eradicate this problem.
As a Muslim and obviously an expert in the Muslim faith, you are a professor of Muslim studies, but also one who is very familiar with the Catholic Church. What do you see that Muslims and Catholics have in common and can work together?
I think something that distinguishes Catholic Christianity from other forms of Christianity that Muslims really resonate with is the commitment to putting our faith into action, to living ethically, to committing to the common good through institutions like hospitals, relief work, but also education. we really stressed education, that there needs to be a space in the increasingly secularized world for religious education to form people in a healthy way, to form young people in a healthy way, to help them establish their relationship with God and to mature as moral human beings to bring something beneficial to this world. And part of that education also has to be learning about the religious other in a positive way, in a way where we are not creating miseducation and hatred towards the other, but a true respect and appreciation for each other's own sense of awareness of the divine and commitment to living a righteous and godly life.
And finally, what did you think of your meeting with Pope Francis? What was that like for you?
Oh, it was lovely. The last time we were in Rome for the first Catholic Muslim Forum, we met, of course, with then Pope Benedict, who received us so very kindly. And so it was exciting for us to be able to have the opportunity this time to meet with Pope Francis, who has done so much to show and demonstrate to people that we need to serve the poor, that we need to embrace each other, that we need to look to the marginalized. So we were very happy and honored that His Holiness received us with such graciousness and encouraged us to continue in our commitment towards to Catholic-Muslim dialogue.
All right, Professor Ingrid Mattson, really a blessing for us to have you joining us from Rome tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Blessing for me to join you, Brian.
And a new Pew Research poll shows an alarming decline in Hispanics identifying as Catholic both in the U.S. and Latin America. The numbers show only 69% of Latino adults across 18 countries in Puerto Rico call themselves Catholic, even though 84% say they were raised in the Catholic Church. In nearly every region surveyed, Catholics have left the church, either to join evangelical Protestant churches or they've left organized religion altogether. Latinos cite different reasons for leaving the Catholic Church, including apparently effective outreach from a new church. A group of young professionals here in Washington hopes to turn that tide by encouraging Latinos to get involved in the Catholic Church. Wyatt Goolsby reports.
Ever since he became the Holy Father, Francis has Catholics celebrating a milestone for the Church, the election of the first Latin American Pope. And it's his example of leadership that a group of young Latinos are bringing to the wider Hispanic community.
They have all these talents, they have all these abilities. It's not just about getting them to happy hour, it's about them getting them to feel engaged in the church.
Jose Pulido runs the Catholic Latino Leadership Initiative. It recently hosted its first program at Georgetown University with keynote speaker Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who has lived in Latin America. The group hopes to get Latinos excited about their faith and address challenges in their community. That includes Catholics leaving the church to attend Protestant services. Some Latinos here say that reality exposes a deeper problem.
That education is where we're lacking in our community, and that's why I feel that a lot of our members are leaving the church, is because they are not being educated.
For many, it's a call to evangelize in their own backyard and across the world. McCarrick says while there are challenges, the Latino population has a bright future in the Catholic Church.
This is what the future is going to look like. It is to these young people that the Lord is going to be turning to say, okay, you take my church, take the leadership of my church, develop it.
Cardinal McCarrick also says these are exciting times in the church's history because of the growing number of Hispanics, Latinos in the United States. He cited one Gallup poll which says more than 45% of young Catholics here in the U.S. are Hispanic. Brian?
All right, thank you, Wyatt. Good story. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick, and we leave you tonight with the heavenly voices of the Sistine Chapel Choir. A new CD, Habemus Papam, is being released in time for Christmas by the choir. Good night and God bless you.